And first of all, I have to say I agree with a lot of the second part of the speech Deputy Penrose said there. In the line of the budget, first of all, anybody would welcome the threshold extension for the medical card holders over 70, and also for the children under 8, for doctor or dental. The worrying part about that is that we now hear the doctors coming out saying that there was nothing agreed. So I presume that needs resolving. When you go through this budget, a lot of it is unimaginative. I know that Brexit has been a major factor in it, but there are a few things. We'll start off with the agricultural side of it. In the line of stamp duty. The stamp duty for the small farmer that goes to a bank and puts a few pounds together is crippling. And this year, no different, there's 1.5% being put onto it. And why don't we try as a country? The EU is supposed to be based on the foundation of protecting the family farm. And why don't we give an escape route for somebody that might have under 100 acres that wants to buy 20 more acres to maybe make their family farm more sustainable, instead of crucifying them another 1,500 or maybe 3,000 on a bit of land that they'd buy. And I have no problem with the conglomerates or the big large operators that buy big office blocks or anything like that. I have no problem with that in the line of paying whatever, if it's an extra percent, I have no problem with that. But someone in a rural part of Ireland that would go in and buy a shop and open a door, someone that would go in and maybe open a pub, and we have a lot of them closed unfortunately, someone that might buy a few acres of land to make sure that they stay in an area. Why don't we have imaginative thinking to try and help those people to put on a light, open a door and make maybe a small rural town more vibrant, or a small rural area like a farmland area more viable. In the line of the carbon tax, and this is a real bear bugger of mine, because the carbon tax is on the people in rural Ireland. First of all, I think it has to be clarified, because over the last 3 days, between different statements coming out, anybody in the agricultural sector, and they have been told, first of all, on the evening of the budget, that green diesel wasn't to be a carbon tax on it. Well, let's be very clear, because we have all this information from the excise and revenue that there is a carbon tax up to now of €20 a tonne on green diesel. Second of all, the new carbon tax is going to be added to that. Then the story came out that contractors and farmers wouldn't be hit with it. The reality of it is, first of all, an agricultural contractor will have to pay the carbon tax in its present form. And I think the government should have a relook at this, first of all, to make sure that at the end of the day, let's have a bit of common sense about this. 95% of work carried out on farms today is done by the agricultural contractor. They're not going to be swallowing this tax, because at the moment they're struggling, a lot of them. And they are going to hand it on to a sector that, as everybody has seen over the last 7 or 8 weeks, especially in the beef and in the sheep sector, is struggling at the moment. And why we don't do an allowance for that is just, I cannot understand it. I'm going to try and put in an amendment when it goes to committee, because I think common sense has to be seen here. Second of all, for the people in the rural parts of Ireland that has less buses, we know the debacle that's gone on about buses over the last 3 or 4 months, the eligibility criteria and all that, and parents having to bring their kids to school. Parents or people having to drive to work in different parts of the country 30, 40, 50 miles. Let no one be shocked if you live in Roscommon or live in Galway, or indeed the Midlands, that you could be driving 40, 50 miles. Some people are driving as far as Maynooth every day. And unfortunately, and it would be great if there was, be it a bus or a train that would shoot them up and shoot them down again when they finish work, but we don't have one on the hour every hour. And These people, it's basically taking money out of their pockets. These are the people in what I call Middle Ireland that year in, year out are crucified, pay their mortgages, put kids through to college, put kids through in secondary school, and every time they're being fleeced. Everyone talks about we're going to poverty-proof this person and that person and the other person. Well, the reality is that they are never poverty-proofed, and they are now, in my opinion, the new poor in Ireland. This is a discriminative tax against people living in rural Ireland that has no option, that hasn't the services. And fine, if the services are there, then a person cannot be cribbing about something. But when those services aren't there, you'd take a photo of a bus in my area if you saw one. That's the reality. And yes, there is 3 million coming in for rural transport, but 3 million to the whole of this country, like, we have to put it into perspective. What does it cost to run one bus in Dublin for the year? And that's not, and Dublin needs infrastructure as well, I'd be the first to say that. So the carbon tax has, like, there is uproar. I'm hearing a lot of people, especially the contractors at the moment, because it's going on to the farmer, and the farmer is in a difficult situation. Unfortunately, they're a price taker. And on top of that, for the people that eat food, and I think that everyone in the country has to eat something, all that is hauled by lorries. It's all hauled right around the country, and the carbon tax is going to affect it. But we don't seem to be bothered at all about the big money spinner. I always say that people in rural parts of the country has no choice in where they work. It's where you get a job and where you can sustain a family living. And they have no choice in that. But they do have a choice if they want to go to Lanzarote or Kerry. That's the choice they have. So the plane can well afford, in my opinion, to take a bit of the hit. In the agricultural budget this time, I welcome the 85 million for the beef, but to be honest about it, if there's a hard Brexit, we'll need a lot of 85 millions, or we have about 100,000 farmers that won't survive, unfortunately. And we have to make sure that we tackle that head on. I know that the Minister has said that there will be more monies there in the line of a hard Brexit. I welcome that, but we need to keep the finger on the pulse. In the line of the money that was unspent, this isn't new money on sheep, this money needs to be divvied out as well. On the designated areas, and this has been, there's 14 and 15% of the country that's designated. There are 38 different notifiable actions. Farmers aren't able to farm their land like someone up or down the road from them. And there was negotiations going on the last 6 or 7 months, and I see that the budget, all it's gone, they needed 10 million, it's gone from 600,000 to 1 million. And that's not going to solve that problem. Let's be honest about it. It's not going to resolve it. One thing I would encourage the Minister to do, and I see there's a new thing, a new €10 supposed to be coming out for calves, for weighing them from the dairy herd to the beef. Why don't we think outside the box? Next spring, we have a major problem coming down the line. There will be 1.345 million calves born in a matter of 2 or 3 months in the dairy herd. Why don't we give the €10 to the people that can export them out of the country? To get as many of them gone as possible, the way that will make it sustainable, and that we won't flood the whole situation again in this country with the factories. Because it's like, once they know that they have heaps of cattle there, they can give you whatever price you take. 1.2 million to Borbia. They better start showing something for it with the amount of money they're getting. So far, all they were able to do over the last few months was make sure that meat processors got Borbia quality assurance in England and in the north, when we couldn't send cattle there beforehand. And ironically enough, which is worrying, I see 2 of the main meat processors at the biggest food fair in the world didn't share the same stand as them this time. They went and done their own stand away from them altogether. And that's a worrying scenario. Nothing for ANC that was before the crash when Fianna Fáil were in power. I think it was something like 4,000 maximum, and we're still only at 3,200 or 300 maximum at the moment, which hasn't brought that up. But I would encourage the Minister to look at, forget about weighing a calf or sending them from the beef to the dairy. A certain amount will go. There's nobody saying they won't. But if we can bring an incentive in, because people like incentives, and exporters love incentives, if we could give that €10 and say, every calf you get out of the country, buddy, you get a tenner for it, and it could alleviate a major situation. It's not that year. It's a year or two down the road, and make sure we do it to the highest animal welfare standards that's required. In the line of Bordnamona and the Midlands, there's a lot of talk at the moment. There's only one solution. I sat with Bordnamona a year ago, and they had a lovely glossy document in front of me, and they were telling me how they were going to do all these lovely things and nobody would ever lose their job. A few months later, I heard that Donnelly's coal yard in Galway was closed. What was the lovely glossy magazine that I looked at doing? Redundancy. Then Sligo closed. What did they do? Redundancy. Then they wanted 450 more people. Redundancy. This was the new way of making new jobs, by the way. And now we're in a scenario where, in my opinion, we can throw money at whatever, but you cannot tell people 9 months ago that there'll be a just transition from 2018 to 2025 and then close the door next Christmas. Because that's what's facing some of these people with the scenario that's going on and the whole planning set up at the moment. It is my opinion that whatever planning or whatever we have to do in here, I'm not worried about on board Penal or DPA, I'm worried about people's jobs. And we're supposed to be legislators in here. And whatever we need to do to make sure that it is a just transition for those workers in Bordnamona from now until 2025, and it was predicted to 27. And everyone bought into that, in all fairness, all of those people bought into that. But you cannot leave them hung out at the moment with what's going on. The 20 million it's great for retrofitting, there's no one saying it's not, but 20 million for retrofitting, I live in Galway, someone else lives in Donegal. I can be retrofitting houses, I can be a contractor, and if I'm the cheapest, I get it. Let no one kid themselves that it's not going to be a Bordnamona worker guaranteed that's going to get it, no more than the re-wetting of bogs. There's 5 million for the re-wetting of bogs. Well, let me be very clear on this, because this is a subject I know a good bit about. On some of the designated bogs, re-wetting has taken place. And no one will prove me wrong that without materials, if you have to use liners, you will not have as many people working. I saw today, I read an article in one of the newspapers that said there'd be 100 people plus 20 more, 120. If you go re-wetting a bog with peat, you need a digger. And the Lascan Corla will understand it better than anyone. And when you go along with your digger, you end up that you put in a scraw to block a drain. And 17 diggers, 240 days, will spend the 5 million without any materials. That's it. There's no ifs or buts about that. And 17 diggers, you can't put 3 into it, by the way. It's one person pulling levers within on a digger. That's how that works. So I think that we need to understand, that this, you can cover a big area, no one is denying that, but this is what's achievable. And remember, the 1,600 jobs, if you take 17 from it, it's 1,583 that we need to find work for. In the line of I welcome the 6 million for the just transition, but we need to do this on a phased basis. It's like going up a hill, bit by bit, and over the 7 years or 8 years, that we make sure that these people get a proper, that they know where they're going. Because you cannot just close the door, as I said earlier, overnight. And whatever we need to do, let's get it out of our heads about shutting them down at Christmas. Let's make sure that what we said we'd do, that we're honourable about it, and until 2027, give them a future. In the line of education, First of all, for the grant for the students that go, the teachers that go to the colleges, I know there may be some complications, but at least there's an effort made in giving that grant back to those student teachers. It is sad to see the school buildings, the funding cut, but I do welcome, I know that there's going to be a small increase in capitation. One thing I think we need to get to grips on here, there's a lot of announcements and budgets and throughout the year that, first of all, 4 years ago, 4 budgets ago, Deputy Naughton it was that announced that the people that had incontinence, that pay by weight, they were going to get an allowance of €75. To this day, that's 4 budgets ago. This has never come in. And I think when we announce something in a budget, we should be honourable enough to make sure that it's done. Second of all, the 3-year water framework. For group water schemes, councils have their tongues out at the moment, right around this country. It was to come in February, it was to come in April. There was 3 people looking at it in May or June. It was to come in September. It's still not here. There is schemes leaking water around the country, and Minister Murphy has not announced that, and that should have been done. Maybe we hadn't money for pensioners, but in my opinion, we should try and prioritise them and children to make sure that Middle Ireland, the people that worked and the people that went before us, are looked after. And one thing I will say, I sat in here, and I'll put it on the record, at more motions in the last, since I came in here on Wednesday night. And you know what? The only motion I can hear anyone talking about is the one on climate change, and it has the same relevance as every other motion. The RSS workers, the CE supervisors. There was a motion that the CE supervisors would be treated right with their pension and with their conditions. We're gone through 3 budgets now, and there's nothing there for them since. And I think that before we do a motion, if we're not going to give something, I remember saying that night, people thought they'd won Dáil Éireann that night when there was a motion and it passed and everyone was all excited. But at the end of the day, nothing happened since. So those people weren't looked after. Carers as well. And the one part of it that hasn't been put out or hasn't been talked about in this budget, and maybe it's legislation, but my understanding is that you need funding for it, is the fair deal. There is a lot of questions coming to politicians from all sides of the divide about the fair deal. Where are we at? Because we can bring in all the legislation we want in the world, but if there isn't a budget to cover that, where are we going? It was promised during the summer, it was announced. It was promised that when we came back from the recess, that it would be that the legislation or the heads of the bills would be ready, and that would be getting it through the Dáil, and everyone anticipated that it would be kicking in January of this year coming. But we don't seem to have made any progress in that, and the reality of it is that a farm or a small little business is like it's like a 100-metre race in a relay. It's handed on from one to the other, and when it's handed on, if you have to basically pay big nursing home fees, it's crippling people. And I know that there is some HSE things there. There is situations where people had to sell land, and I think that the government should honour that, bring it in. Don't go saying you're going to bring in something when you're not, and help those people that are in a serious situation, that are paying large sums of money, because at the end of the day, what we will end up doing is have someone else going on social welfare that won't have a farm to survive on. But I would ask the government, in my final analysis, in the line of the stamp duty for the family farm or for the small business, if there's amendments in there, would you please look at them carefully and honour them? And will you look at the carbon tax on the contractor? Because, yeah, everyone will say, I'm a contractor. Yeah, I am, yeah, but like, I won't make up the world. I'm talking about the contractors around the country, because 95% of them, or 95% of the work done on the farms is by a contractor, and it's them, they'll pass it on. And what I'm saying is, we need to put in certain measures. We know there's going to be, if there is a Brexit, there's going to be a crisis in agriculture. Do we want to finish them off altogether, or is there a willingness to try and help them? And we can do that through amendments. Thank you very much. Let's go.